Right, good morning, Year 11. Apologies for being a bit wrapped up today, it's a bit chilly in here. I thought what we'd look at today, as I said yesterday, we'll do another mode for C2 Section B. Okay, so that's your transactional and persuasive writing. And what we're looking at today is letter writing. Pretty standard one, comes up quite frequently. A little bit antiquated now, a little bit old-fashioned. I think there was a student last year who said, when am I actually ever going to need to write a letter? I think a couple of days later she had to. So there are some sort of, particular situations where an email won't suffice, other social media won't suffice, and actually a formally or not formally, informally written letter might be absolutely appropriate. So you do need to know how to do it, not just for the purposes of an exam, but maybe just sort of wider life skills as well. Okay. Just to get you started, it is important when you do letter writing with so many of these things, like I said with the review yesterday, not so much the travel review, the piece of travel writing, but when it comes to something like a film review or something like that, it's not just about the ingredients which you can throw in there, because anyone could learn those, okay? This, after all, this section B is a test of your language skills, your writing style, your capability to craft, your capability to adapt language according to your audience and purpose and so on. But it is also something where you've actually to demonstrate that you can think in a sophisticated way, okay? So I've written here just to clarify for you. In order to get those higher grades, in order to write a good letter, if you like, you need to do something more than simply demonstrate that you know about the conventions of letter writing and that you have learnt a list of persuasive techniques. Those ones, like I said yesterday, that you've probably been looking at since CS7, okay? And you should have an understanding and good sort of list of about 10, 15 particular techniques. The thing that you need to be able to do much more is create quickly an intelligent argument, okay? And you need to be able to articulate that in an appropriate and sophisticated manner, okay? The fact that in this particular section you've got 1 hour, and within that hour you've got to write 2 responses, and you've got about 25 minutes to do your writing and 5 minutes to do your planning, it's not so much actually the planning in terms of like it was with a piece of creative writing, it's actually using those 5 minutes to come up with those intelligent ideas, to come up with something within the context which you think would fit well within that particular mode, in this case a letter. Okay? Make sure you read the question clearly, because a lot of students do actually sort of launch into something and don't look at the absolute details. That's what I've put specifically here. Okay? You need to obviously understand that contextual detail. I'm not suggesting you go off into some strange sort of trance again and start thinking to yourself and imagining, were you writing that letter, were you writing that review, were you writing that piece of travel writing? But nonetheless, you do need to actually think about the details here. Okay? So specifically, what is the mode? Obviously the mode we're working in today is letter, but is it quite specific? Is it just a simple letter? Is it going to be something which is altered by who you're sending it to, the context and the subject matter of which you're writing about it? The technology, for example. So what is the mode? Who is your audience specifically? Okay? And again, you need to be thinking in particular terms. You need to be thinking contextually. Quite a common one that comes up is saying something like, write to your local MP. Well, it's very, very unlikely that any of us, you, me, would write to our local MP and it would get directly to them first of all. They're going to have some sort of secretary, they're going to have somebody who actually filters that correspondence for them. So it might be something that you take into account, okay? And finally, very, very clearly, what is the purpose? It's something you really, really have to think about. I'm not just talking the general purpose to persuade, because then we're simply going back to our persuasive techniques, okay? It has to be the purpose which is specific to that particular question, okay? And that's where it comes into these ideas. You need to think about something, an intelligent argument to do with a particular purpose, okay? Again, I've put at the bottom there, it sounds obvious, but in your planning, you need to think about those sort of things in detail, okay? Quickly, but in detail. Really try and engage with it, that is the key. Okay. Now, formatting. It's a very, very frequently asked question. Do you need to format your letter? And the answer is no. Just like when we come on to look at an article or something like that, you don't have to do columns, of course. I wouldn't expect you to. You definitely don't have to draw pictures and things like that. Nonetheless, it is useful to know, not just beyond your wider skills in life, how you format a letter. And you don't have to go into the processes for the purposes of this of thinking up and wasting the little time that you have thinking up addresses and so on and so forth. But it might be when you actually come to write it up. Your piece of paper there is not a letter in itself. It's the copy, it's the word, it's the text for a letter, just like the copy for an article or the copy for a speech or anything like that. But nonetheless, it is useful to know, okay? So very, very quickly and simply, the writer's address, so your address would go top right. Below that is the date. You might choose to put the date. It might be relevant to what you are saying, okay? And by that, I simply mean about engaging with that context again, particularly with everything that's going on at the moment. Would fundamentally you be writing a letter to a local MP, a local councillor, a local newspaper, whatever it might be, without having the current circumstance globally, let alone in your local community, impacting on what you're saying? And of course you would, because now it's impacting on absolutely everything. So do be thinking about, is a date relevant? Because it might be something you refer to within. It might be something that actually stands out. Okay? Left-hand side, below it, is the recipient's address. Again, you're not to know that, so don't waste time particularly thinking about it. If you're asked to write to a local MP, you could simply put the Houses of Parliament if you're desperate to. It's not going to actually take anything away, you're not going to have marks taken off for it, but you're not going to have additional marks of formatting something absolutely properly. Okay? You would be expected to put in a title. So, dear Mr. Jones, dear Sir, Madam, whatever it might be. And then we come to the reason for you writing. Now, in this particular formatted letter, you can see it's done very quickly there because, again, contextually, what are we talking about? If I have requested applicants for a job, you don't want to have to then go into the letter and read into the paragraphing of the letter to find out what that letter is about with all the other correspondence and mail that a company might have that day. So if you've got something very, very clearly, this is about the application for the job, you can put it at the top, okay? So it's the subject matter of the letter, the reason for the writing, if you like. If it's a little bit more of a discursive letter that you really want somebody to engage with the content of, rather than simply be able to filter it for the purposes of their correspondence, their mail for that day, it can be something where you actually write that in paragraph form. I'll show you an example of that, but dear Sir, Madam, today I'm writing to you in order to, I don't know, express my interest in this, okay? Then you've got the letter's content, and I've asterisked that because that is the fundamental part of it. That's what they really want to see you doing. They want you to get the other stuff right, but they want to see you doing that, and I'll come on to that in a moment. Then you need to make sure that you've got yours sincerely or yours faithfully. Rule of thumb, yours sincerely if you know the reader's name, yours faithfully if you've started it with something, the title, Sir, Madam, and so on. And then you're signing off. You can scrawl a signature if you choose to, and then your name printed. Okay? Again, these are not things that they are going to say, right, we're going to give loads of marks for doing that properly. It needs to be the content, but the formatting of it is something actually which is a benefit as well, simply so you know it. Okay? All right. Now, this is where we get to the structure, okay? And structure and format are different. Format is how it looks on a page. Okay? We used to have a job, what we call a DTP, desktop publisher, and it will be about formatting how the front of a piece of press looks. Okay? This is the structure. This is the structure of the copy. This is the structure of the text. So just like when I've gone through a review or something like that, I've suggested in your piece of travel writing you might start with something anecdotal, then you do the reveal of the place, and you might include various other things, and you have a link at the beginning and the end. Those are structural features. When it comes to a letter, given that your letter should be between, and this is, you know, as an English teacher, we hate having to take things down to a mathematical level. But for the purposes of something that needs to be planned and delivered quickly, okay, but you also need to think about, sometimes we have to do that. And that is part of the exam skill process. Bear with me. Thank you. It's part of the exam skill process to say, right, if I've got a set amount of time, and I've got a word count I need to fulfill, what do I need to do? Okay? So, given that your letter should be, reminder, between 300 and 400 words, Any unnecessary inclusion of addresses are not to be counted. So all that stuff that I've said, formatting wise, it's not going to be any word count. So don't think you simply have to fill the page, fill a word count. It's not about that. Okay? But based on that, you can predict that the title, so Dear Mr. Jones, and the signing off, yours sincerely and all that, should take no more than 10 words. So we've knocked off 10 words from our total already. Okay? Your explanation of why you are writing it, okay, might be a dozen words. If you do it in a paragraph form, it might be 30, 40, maybe even 50 words. But you can see straight away that of your 300 to 400 words, you are down to 250 to 350, okay? Now, where I said asterisk-wise, the content was absolutely key. If we are knocking off word count, okay, you need to be dividing it up. And if I'm going to say, right, I'll give you a particular topic or what the focus of the letter might be, and then you're being asked to write in paragraphs, because you obviously have to do it in standard English, usually do it in standard English, if there's any formality to it. If you're going to do that, and you've got 3 to 4 paragraphs that you include in the main flesh, the content of the letter, and you've got that word count left, then it stands to reason that each of those need to be between 80 and 90 words, which again isn't a great deal. You might think it is, but they need to be done within, how long? 7 or 8 minutes each. So it has to be quick, okay? Within those 80 or 90 words, and again, this isn't simply a case of ticking off a word count, but these are the things you need to include. You need to be thinking about the relevant content, so an argument, and you need to be including your technique as well. So all those persuasive techniques that you know very well by now, all right? So all of that should be in that 5 minutes planning. And I've said many, many times to you, by way of hyperbole, exaggeration, you need to make sure, fundamentally, that this is not simply, this is rather a very, very attritional exam. It's one where you've finished your section A, suddenly you're into section B, 5 minutes planning, 25 minutes, 5 minutes planning, 25 minutes, checking it. So it's going to be something by the end of it. You put down your pen when the invigilator says stop writing and you're exhausted. Okay? So you need to be thinking, but you need to be thinking quickly. All right. When it comes to structure, okay, this is what we are looking at. So your title, your explanation, paragraph 1, 2, and 3. You might have a fourth, okay, but thinking of your word count. Those are the main flesh of it. Then you have a closing sentence. I hope this is acceptable to you. Please, I'm very grateful you've taken time to read my letter. Look forward to hearing from you soon, that type of thing. You're signing off sincerely, faithfully, and your name. These 3 are the key ones, though. That's what we're going to look at now, okay? So here's a sort of typical thing you might get, okay? Maybe a bit boring to you, but actually these sort of things that keep life going, okay? So write a letter to your local councillor requesting more recreational equipment in your local area, okay? And you need to read that clearly. Who is it to? Go back to your contextual modal things. My local councillor. Now the chances are, based on that we are thinking about our formality. If we think in terms of formality completely informal to very, very formal, it might be you're thinking to yourself, well, where does this person lie on this? Your best mate, who you talk in very colloquial, informal terms to, would be at this end of it. Your local MP, possibly, okay, or maybe even something even higher, would be at this end of it. Mr. Collins, probably be about here, okay? Me, you make your choice, okay? But there's degrees of formality. Your local councillor is likely to be and want to be quite an accessible person, but nonetheless they are a local politician. You're going to be a busy person, so the chances are you are going to have to write quite formally, and by that formality we come back to that idea of standard English, the type of English that you are marked for in the classroom. Okay? So you've identified it as a letter. Obvious. You've identified who your audience is. Your focus area, requesting more recreational equipment for your local community. Things for people to do in their local community. In your 5 minutes planning, you need to either identify those specific points of context, you need to decide upon the level of formality, so the voice you're going to use, and we use that in creative writing, we use it when we write reviews, and we're using it again here. One of the main pitfalls, again I keep saying it, one of the main pitfalls that you as students fall into is writing too much in your own voice. Absolutely fine in certain circumstances. But if you are writing something with a level of formality, then you need to be thinking about, is my voice the most appropriate one? Okay? Obviously you are representative here, it is from you. But you need to be able to change your voice, and you do that quite naturally, okay? It just needs to come across in your writing. If I said to you, you're chatting with your mates at a party or something like that, you would speak in one voice. If suddenly you're speaking to somebody in school, a member of staff or something like that, you would speak in a different voice. If you're going to a job application or a college application or something like that, you probably speak in a different voice, okay, with degrees of formality to them. So you do need to be thinking about it, and you need to think how that is represented on the page, okay? This is the key one here. You need to identify, and this is the part of your planning, the identification and expansion on 3 to 4 main arguments based on the point you are making. You are saying, why do we need more recreational equipment in our local community? That is the thought process. That actually is the thing they are testing on. The sophistication of your thoughts and how clearly you can articulate them. Okay? And within that, you've got to identify and integrate which persuasive techniques you'll use. Now, you again should have, and I can put a slide up if you want, you should have a list, if not up there, somewhere, of all those persuasive techniques. Okay? If it helps you that in your first sort of minute of planning, you are quickly writing them down so you can make use of them for both of the pieces of writing you're doing, that's fine. So you can simply refer to it. But you need to say, right, these are the points I'm making, but this is the way in which I'm going to communicate them. Okay? Let's have a look. So, if that was the case, writing that letter, for example, should you be starting this letter, you might begin it, okay? And this is what I mean by your introductory sentence. It doesn't have to be one where you're simply putting it in big letters, capitalised, saying this is what I'm writing about, okay? So, dear Councillor Smith, there is actually, by the way, I know it looks a bit odd, but there's this sort of thing about, is it double R, double L, or single L? Okay. I write to you requesting that funds be invested in recreational equipment and initiatives targeted at young people in our local area. Very, very quickly, I've got to the point. If you are a busy person, this might be slightly different if you're writing it to a friend, but if you're a busy person, you want a clarity straight away. What is this letter about? What are they asking for? Okay? And then you introduce your reasoning. As a 16-year-old resident, someone who lives locally, I think that such investment in both facilities and activities would benefit the town hugely, not just for those whose age group I represent, but a much broader demographic, so other people as well. So immediately I'm starting to use certain techniques in there. It might just seem like content, because I've thought about my context. What is important to the councillor? Now, a councillor is an elected politician. So it might be you're simply thinking, well, I'm going to appeal to pull on their heartstrings here. You're a local person, you represent us locally, you should be doing this. But if they're an elected person, they're going to be thinking about votes. So including something about a broader demographic, it benefits a lot of people, and it'd be you and young people, of course, getting much, much more involved in politics now, at a local level and a national level. It might be something where this councillor starts thinking to themselves, hang on, if I act on this, maybe it'll benefit me. Well, these are subtle things, but they're subtle things that you need to be thinking about. If I might take this opportunity to explain some of the reasons for this. And again, I've started using those language techniques as well. Okay, rhetorical questions and so on. The first person I've used in there, so I'm directing it directly at them. But you can see, even though there's a clarity, there's a formality to this as well. Okay? Then it comes up with my reasons. And you can see here, I've done one, I've started another, I'm probably near enough my word count already. And again, this took me, okay, old man doing it for a long time, but this probably took me 10 minutes. My generation, hang on. My generation are the future of this community, so emotive language. And I might add the future voters, exclamation mark, making it very, very clear in terms of my intent here. However, in a recent study, the British Medical Association stated that almost 50% of children under the age of 16 were now classed as obese. Now, again, techniques that I've used there, I've given it some, if you like, some expert clout. It's not just a 16-year-old writing saying, I think we should have a gym in the park, okay? It's actually saying I've done my research here. So I've included technique, statistics as well. I am sure, okay? Opinion, expressed as a fact. I am sure you agree that this is a shocking statistic. I could have done a list of 3 there, but I've got some alliteration as well. And needs addressing, question mark. It's over to them. You're creating a dialogue in this. Remember, this is transactional writing, not just persuasive writing, transactional. He's expecting a response. As such, I would argue that rather than dealing with the results of this problem, we should all be acting before the issue has arisen and do more to maintain the health and well-being of our younger generation. You can see that what I've articulated there, even though I've been putting techniques in, is the sophistication of the argument. They want to see that you can think things, and they want to see that you can get those ideas down on paper clearly. As our democratically elected representative, I believe that it is your professional, legal, and above all, moral obligation to act on behalf of those who do not have the funds or influence to make this happen. List of 3. Okay? But again, it's creating that dialogue, it's creating that dynamic between, or the transaction between, in this case, the writer and the reader. They're expecting something back. And I've gone on to my second one. An additional result of not having sufficient recreational facility in the area is the additional social impact, among them crime. I'm going back up to my other demographic. Who do you think gets worried about crime? Is it just the young people? Probably not, it's probably the older people. A recently released young offender from this area said, one of the main reasons for me getting involved in crime was boredom. There's nothing to do around here, and no one to guide us, surely, blah, blah, blah. Okay, and again, I've used a different technique. I've actually got a different voice in there. Someone saying something, another expert, not an expert from the British Medical Association, an expert who's been on the receiving end of not having anything to do. Okay, now obviously what I do there is then finish off that one. I might come up with a third reason, something along the lines of, it's good for community, okay? And then I'd say my closing line, thank you very much for taking the time to read my letter, but I'm very much look forward to hearing from you and seeing that you are putting these ideas into action. That is, after all, your responsibility as our locally elected official, okay? Yours sincerely, whatever it might be, okay? So this is the point I'm making. You know the techniques. You should know the formatting. I've given you an idea of the structure, but the key to it has to be the sophistication of the content with those things, those techniques integrated into it for effect. Okay? I've done some other questions here, but you can come up with ones of your own. Okay? Again, be thinking about all those things I've said. You can obviously go back and pause this and find out what you need to find out. But write a letter to a friend explaining why you think getting academic qualifications is beneficial. Okay? What does it offer you? It might be that you don't. Okay? But again, it's coming up with reasons why. I think it is beneficial to have academic qualifications because you may need them now, but you might need them at a later date. It sets me apart from the crowd. It gives me a sense of satisfaction that I've done something and achieved something. Whatever the reasons might be, but again, integrate some technique in there as well. Write a letter to your local and be suggesting ways in which your local environment could be improved ecologically. So what things could we be doing? One of the wonderful benefits, if there is such a thing from all of this circumstance we're in at the moment, is we're thinking the earth very rapidly is actually somehow healing itself in certain ways. Okay? How could we maintain that? This is what I'm talking about, the date. In the time when all this circumstance is over, maybe we should be writing to our MPs saying, do you know what, as the government, it is your job to lead. Thank you for doing what you did do, but it's your job to lead on the things which positively can have come out of this terrible experience. Okay? So it could be something you could write about. Write a letter to a representative of a charity you support suggesting ways you and your friends could raise money. Okay? Doesn't matter. Sometimes it's going to be vague. Who is the representative? Okay, so it might be just dear sir, madam, brackets, representative of the charity, whatever it might be. Okay, I'm very interested in your charity because, and you could state why. There are various ways in which I'd like to raise money with my friends. These are a few of them. Please let them know they fit in with your strategy and blah, blah, blah. Okay? Write a letter of application for a job you would love to have, explaining why and what credentials you have to do the job well. Okay? It used to be that when you actually applied for a job, you had to write that letter, type the letter. Okay? Nowadays things tend to be done somewhat differently. But nonetheless, the idea is the same. When you do a job, when you do an application, those of you thinking of university or something like that, it is a case of, if you want to go to university, what goes into that personal statement? It is about which courses that I want, but why am I good for it? Okay? You need to be thinking about that. Okay? So there are various things that you could have a go at. You can make up some of your own. You can write a letter to me, politely. Okay? And give it a go. And tomorrow, maybe even later today, if I have a chance, we will look at speech writing. Okay? Best of luck. Give those things a go.